what are the different ways that people can create content in your mind?
Oh man. I mean, just like you mentioned, um, I think one way is like find a way that you're comfortable and then repurpose it. Right. So if you're great on video, awesome. Do subtitles. There's free apps where you can literally transcribe it and then it will take the audio and turn it into a PDF. Right. There's a million ways you can transcribe, but like find your forte, find what you're super comfortable with, and you can rinse and repeat it. And content is like, people get so boggled by the idea of content. You are not reinventing the wheel. You are repurposing the wheel. If you're a project manager, I recently told a PM, he's like, I don't know what to post. I was like, well, I was recently in the IT world. Why don't you talk about, do a 60-second clip on the advantages and disadvantages of agile versus waterfall methodology. That's a massive topic, global topic, that I'm sure plenty of people weigh in on. And the whole idea is like, you want people to engage on your post. When people like, comment, or share, specifically comment, your profile spreads like a wildfire. And the cool thing about engaging is if you engage, this is another problem with job seekers, they just apply, right? That's not a good strategy. You want to, now I always caveat pretty much every single thing I tell a job seeker, because if you're employed, you don't necessarily want to comment, say, hey, this job looks interesting, because your whole network will see it. So instead, you should add your value to the post, right? So instead of saying, hey, this job looks interesting, I would say, hey, I was doing some research on your company and I noticed your stock rose 17% due to new AI technology. How do I know that? Google, right? Just simple things where you got to give before you can take. You got to give more before you ask for anything.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to show job seekers. If you just click submit, you're going to be in a sea of millions. You have to give to, you got to feed the beast. You got to give to the platform first.
I mean, and that's if people want to learn a little bit more about that, definitely read Give and Take by Adam Grant. There's so much in what you just said. And I think people get bogged down because they think like, I need to sound good. I need to be an expert. I need to, show up in a certain way. And then I need to get clicks and I need to get likes and I need to get I mean, I've been making content for gosh knows how many years, and sometimes it gets great engagement and sometimes crickets, right? And I think that getting comfortable with the crickets is a really important thing to go into it with, because a lot of times, and this is similar with the job search, people are saying like, well, I applied to the job and I didn't hear back. And, we all know that job boards have like a 1 to 5% response rate, right? So it's like,
Right.
It's like I've applied to 100 jobs and I've only heard back from one. And I have to go, yeah, that's pretty normal. It's like, oh, I reached out to a bunch of people and only one got back to me. Yep, that's pretty normal. I posted things every single week for the last 3 months and I've gotten like no traction with it. Again, all pretty normal. But it's the process of doing it that gives you stories to tell in interviews, connects you with people that you otherwise wouldn't have connected with. And if you're too terrified to write your own blog post, maybe just comment, thank you for writing this blog post on someone else's comment, right? One of the things I've been encouraging people who are really scared to do is to go to Medium, find articles that have a lot of engagement that you like, and then go back to that person's LinkedIn profile and you will almost guaranteed find that Medium article shared with 0 comments on it. And if you comment, that person will see it. And then you can have a conversation about that topic that you actually are interested in. One of the things that I think is so interesting in everything you're saying here is you mentioned this phrase of invisible disabilities. And then you talk about making people visible. And I love that, back and forth there, right? So you have invisible disabilities, but we want to showcase your visible strengths, right? And so what do you think people should be thinking about when they put themselves out there in this way? What are the things they should be considering? Maybe the perspective they should take? Should they be who should they be thinking about when creating this content? What sort of goals should they have?
Well, first and foremost, they should be focused on themselves. They shouldn't be focused on, um, look at your ability, not your disability, right? I have this quote that I like created over the past 18 months because it just resonated with me. A disability is not an inability to do something.
Hmm.
Rather, I see it as a way to, an opportunity to go a separate path and arrive at a solution. And it's on this path where novel and innovative ideas exist. So what do I mean by that? You mentioned like people are timid and they get so pissed off with like they fail or they don't get the job or whatever. You got to get comfortable with failure. You have to understand that it's just a part of, it's an ingredient in success. It's just part of it. You just have to like acknowledge that it's okay to fail. It is totally okay to fail. And you mentioned also about content. It's a marathon. It's not a race, right? You've been in it for many years, right? Posting content, but you see results. The more you do it, who cares if the comments and likes, I see them as vanity metrics because I'm running the long game, not just the race. But in terms of disability, I got very candid, like right at the beginning of the pandemic. I created a video about my disability, but it wasn't depressing or anything. I added pop culture into it. So I added little video clips of popular movies, basically saying like I was, I'm looking for job seekers with disabilities. I want to highlight them, blah, blah, blah. And in the course of a day, a company doing the same thing in the United Kingdom, helping college students with disabilities find work, reached out to me just from a single video on the other side of the world. And how do they do that? They're not connected to me. I believe it was because the body of my post had those keywords, right? It didn't have hashtags, 0 hashtags. It was just the keywords. They were searching for keywords.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is, if you don't put yourself out there, if you're not vulnerable, right, that's hard too. I'm not saying like you have to be vulnerable, but you have to push out your value. You must push out, disability or not. I mean, especially job seekers with disabilities. Okay, you don't have to talk about your disability, but if you don't talk about anything, then you can't expect results if you don't take action.
And I think that's really where people get stuck, right? It's, well, how do I talk about certain things and not other things, right? How do I put myself out there with my disability, but maybe not talk specifically or focus specifically on that, right? Like you see the YouTube channels that are about autism and they talk all about their autism, right? And that's super helpful and it's great that they're putting themselves out there. But there's, tons of people who are creating content that never talk about their anxiety or their disability or anything like that. They just focus on the work, right? And what's nice to know is that there's a million ways to make it work, right? There's no one right solution. There's no one right way to do it. Of course, there's best practices, but there's also this something that I've struggled with too, is the when you start making content and you start putting it out there, it almost becomes a little bit confusing whether or not you're going to become a content creator and try and get like the vanity metrics and maybe even advertisers on your videos and all those things, and then or are you using the content in service of a different goal, right? And this is why I think like keeping the goals in mind is so important when starting to create content, right? You could create a podcast in order to sort of connect with people and put your ideas out there and maybe even like market your business a bit. Or you can try and like build a giant podcast that makes revenue on its own, right? And sometimes there's people that make both happen, right? But there's always this idea of like, it's in service of something, right? It's in service of getting yourself out there, becoming more visible. And then that allows people to be more adaptable with what they're putting out there, right? It doesn't have to be, you can try a bunch of things that don't work and that's okay, right? Because your goal is to continually see what the different ways you can put these ideas out there